Hello there, friends and sane persons. My name is Kyle, and it's time for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. If this is your first time joining us, or even if it's not, Wednesday Whimsy is a show I do every Wednesday where I talk about a board game or a board game topic. And, it's sometimes a game review, sometimes a top 10, sometimes something else that has yet to be decided. But we usually take about 25, 30 minutes, somewhere in that range, to talk about something board game related. This week is actually the first of a two-part series. This week I'm going to talk about a game, and then next week I'm going to talk about an aspect of that game in greater detail. This is a game that I like quite a lot. The game is Spirit Island. Now, if you've paid attention to my top 100 games, or several of the lists that we do on Saturday mornings on the regular show, Spirit Island tends to come up a lot because it's a game that I have a lot of love and affinity for. So that's kind of a spoiler, I guess, of where I come out about it. But what I wanted to do this week is to talk about the game itself, give you some thoughts on how it works, what's special about it, things like that. And then next week, I'm going to come back and talk about the different spirits. I'll give you my list, a ranked list of my top spirits from the Spirit Island game. So with with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into what Spirit Island is, what it's about. So what this is it's a game where you're going to take on the role of one of several different nature spirits. There's a huge stack of them, 25 or so, and they all, they have interesting names. We here have the spirit slumbering beneath the island. We have Stones. What is it? Stones, unyielding defiance, heart of the wildfire. There's a bunch of different spirits, a huge stack of them. I've got them all right here. There you go. And you're defending this island where all these spirits reside against a horde of colonists who are coming to invade and destroy your peace. So the goal of the colonists, of course, is to, they I guess have come from Europe. The game actually gives you different European nations that you can fight against. So it's colonists that are coming from somewhere, and they're essentially going to build their own civilization on this island and oppress the native people and kind of delete the memory of all these different spirits. And so you and your friendly spirit allies are trying to get rid of these invading forces. You're going to win. There's a couple of different ways to win. You start the game. At the start of the game, there is well, when I say there's a couple ways to win, there's really just one way, but the conditions for it change over time. You're going to start the game with some conditions, and then as you improve, the conditions are going to become easier and easier until such time that you're able to win the game. So let's talk a little bit about how it works. So the game has a couple of phases. And the phases are kind of procedural. It's a very procedural game. But really, the start of your turn, you're going to do something called growth. So I have this here. This spirit can serve as our demo. And you'll see these tracks here. So certain spots are going to start uncovered. There's a top track which generally shows you how much energy you get, how much power you get each turn. That's the currency you're going to use to pay for things. And then another track that shows you how many card plays you get. So each turn, you can play a certain number of cards. This is this is the number. There's also, on this spirit, there's different elemental symbols, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But each turn, you're going to use one of these growth powers here, which are usually going to help you to get your tokens out on the board, which are going to help you to get cards, add new cards to your hand, or recover cards that you've used, or maybe get you power or do other things. Each one's very different from spirit to spirit. So you're going to select a number of those depending on the spirit, usually one, but sometimes two. And then everyone's going to kind of take your hand of cards, because in this game you've got this hand of cards, and you're going to decide which cards you want to play. You're also going to collect power. That's, I guess, part of this. And each card, there's two different kinds of cards. There are slow cards and fast cards. And you're going to select the ones you'd like to play. You can talk to each other during this. In fact, you probably should. And you're going to pay their power cost. You pay it right now up front. And then later on, you'll be able to use the powers. And then after you've kind of made all those decisions, you're going to see what happens. First, everyone gets to play and activate all of the fast powers that they've chosen. So, for example, this is a fast power, and it'll give me some sort of bonus. Let's see, there we go, some sort of bonus here. And then there's a boosted bonus. I mentioned those symbols that you can get. You'll see that each card is going to give you a number of symbols. Let's see, right there, number of symbols. And then also your spirit might itself give you a number of symbols. And you can sometimes, if you have the right symbols, you're able to do more powerful actions on the cards that you've played. You also have some innate powers like this here that are going to use the symbols as well. You don't spend them, you simply show that you have them, and then you have access to that symbol. So you'll use anything that's fast. Fast happens before the invaders have a chance to activate. Then you're going to look at the invader board, and the invaders are going to do 3 different actions. First, they're going to ravage, then they're going to build, and then they're going to explore. And so you'll see, it'll tell you which area they're going to ravage in. Now, I did leave out an event step. There is an event in the first expansion that came to the game with the game, that I think it was Branch and Claw expansion. There was an event deck that you would add into this. It's an optional rule, but it's interesting because the events themselves are not just something bad happens. Usually it's something, there's usually some kind of a choice based upon how healthy the land is or some other factor. And then there are factors that affect beasts on the land and affect the natives on the island. So sometimes these events can be, really good. It's just really depends. There's also a fear card phase. As the game goes by, you're going to be scaring these invaders, and you'll earn a resource that's called fear. And every time, I think it's 4 per player. And once you've got 4 per player, it resets, and you get one of these fear cards. And so you'll reveal the fear cards, and depending on what level, how far along in the game you are, you'll get these effects as well. These are always good for you. The event cards are sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes in between. So fear cards are always in the game. The events, it depends on what you're doing. Anyway, you'll resolve that, and then the invaders are going to ravage. When they ravage, they're going to do damage to the land, which puts out blight tokens, and then they're going to do damage to the native population, which is going to sometimes kill the native population. If the natives survive, they're going to fight back, and that's a way that you can eliminate some of the invaders. You'll do damage to the different buildings that they've got, or the people, and that's one way you can kind of use the local people to kind of fight people off. Sometimes you'll damage them also by card effects that do it directly, but you're going to do these in order. So it's ravage, then build, and then explore, and you'll flip over a card. So ravage and build, you know what's going to happen. You know that if it built last turn, it's going to ravage the next turn. It's nearly always that way unless affected by an event. And then explore is going to be sort of the wild piece of this, where you're going to flip over the card and new invaders are going to come out. And so because of the procedural nature of this, you have that information, and the goal of the game is to manipulate what you can do to prevent things from happening. So, for example, if I'm able to clear, or either to destroy or to move the invaders out of a certain region, they won't be able to build, which means that they won't be able to ravage, which gives me a little bit of a reprieve. Or, you can gather people into one area so that they're doing their damage sort of only in one area, and then you can leave the other areas alone and try and focus it that way. So anyway, the invaders do their thing, and then any slow powers are going to activate. In general, the slow powers are usually better, but of course they happen at the end of the invader phase after they've had a chance to do terrible, horrible things to your island. So there's, you've got to wait for these good things. And then there's kind of a general reset phase. In general, the cards you play, once you play them, they go into your discard pile, and you don't normally get them back unless you use a growth power or some other action that allows you to pull them back. So there's that aspect, but in general, that's it, right? You do your thing, the invaders do theirs, and then you sort of get the final swing in the slow power phase, and you go through this until one of the win or loss conditions occur. So the loss conditions are you've got this blight card, and when there's a certain number of blight on the island, you lose the game. If the spirits are eliminated, for example, it's possible when the invaders do damage, they can remove your presence from the island. If you don't have any presence, you're eliminated, you lose. And there are other loss and win conditions or loss conditions that can come from different aspects of the game. And then the win condition, that's going to change. So at the start of the game, you win if there are no invaders left on the island at all. And then as you get more fear, as you sort of scare them a little bit, the fear cards are kind of a timer. And after every 3 fear cards, the victory conditions get a little bit easier. So there's 3 kinds of invaders. There's these little people. There's these small plastic houses. I think they're called settlements or cities. I don't know. They have names, but it's small houses and big houses, really. And then there's the big houses. And so you start at the beginning of the game. If there's none of this white stuff on the board, you win. Then after you get to level 1, if there are none of these big houses on the board, you win. And then, or sorry, I should get my level boards out. But if there are none of the physical, the structures on the board, you win. And then if there are none of these, you win. And then if you get all the way through the fear deck, you just win automatically. So that's kind of how you win. Is it's managing the fear and the destruction and controlling the locations. And if it sounds like there's a lot going on, well, there really is. But that's kind of basically how it works. It's very cooperative. You're definitely working together and trying to manipulate the timing of things and the aspects of the game to work in your favor. So let's go ahead and talk about some things that make the game particularly special. So one of the things that makes it really special is the unique characters, right? I already showed you some of them, but you've got this huge pile of different spirits, and they all kind of do something very different, right? We have here Lightning's Swift Strike, and on the back, it's going to tell you a little bit about it and its play style, and it's also going to give you a sense of what it's good at, what it's bad at, and its overall complexity level. So you can scale the game very easily just by picking different spirits. You can, and also, like I mentioned, you're using these different growth powers to sort of customize the energy you get, the number of cards you get. They all have their own unique powers that they start the game with, special bonuses and rules, lots of opportunities to sort of build this character to do what you need it to do. And then if that weren't enough, you're also going to be customizing your hand of cards, because you start the game with normally 4 cards, but it really depends on the spirit. So you've got sort of your customized starting deck. And then as the game goes on, you're going to get access to these minor powers, which are just more cards. And there's, I don't know, 100 of them. And also you have the ability to get major powers, and major power cards, they just have a different back. They take the place of another card that you have, so you have to get rid of something else to get one. But they're generally going to do large and expensive things, so they're often better late game, but you never know, right? Sometimes it's going to be the right thing at the right time. There's even one with one of my favorite spirits, which is the ocean. It works best with them. You can use it with anybody, but if you set it up, essentially what you do is you I think it's called Cast Them into a Briny Grave or something like that. I don't remember the name of the card, but you can essentially wipe a whole map piece off the board. You can destroy everything. I think technically that means the game ends in a draw, and if it's a tie, you win. It's kind of a Pyrrhic victory there. But it's just with these different cards, you're kind of tooling the spirit to do the things you want. When you buy a new card, when you acquire it, you're looking not only at its cost and its artwork, but what it does, and then also the different elements it's going to give you, because those are going to work together well or poorly with a different spirit. Lots of customization in this, lots of different characters, things you don't normally see or do, there's in this game. There's just a lot of different options in the game too. I talked only about the base game, but there's also a huge pile of different scenarios that you can play with. If you've played the base game too many times so that you know everything, well, there's two main expansions, and then there's also, just in those expansions and in the base game, a scenario deck. You play with a different set of rules. In one scenario, you're trying to defend the heart of the island, and so there's one area where if invaders end up there, you lose just automatically. But you get a whole bunch of extra boosts that are going to help you control and keep people out of there. So then there's another one where there's these treasures, and you're sort of doing an action to find certain relics of power, and the invaders are also trying to find them. And so based upon who gets more, they're going to give you some special ability, and then if you get a certain number, you're going to be able to win the game more easily. If the invaders get a certain number, then they win. Lots of different options, and I have not even played with all of the scenarios. I played with a lot of them, but there's just so much to explore. There's also, I think if you have all the expansions, there's 5 different nations. And what these do is the nations come with a special card that's going to tell you different things they do. It just makes the game harder, right? They never make, this stuff never makes the game easier. It makes the game more difficult by giving the nation a specific personality. One of the nations loves to mine, and so when they do damage, they're going to damage the land even more quickly. Another one likes to build. They're just going to build, and so you're going to have more buildings to deal with more quickly every turn. And then there's also, in the second third of the game, there's cards that are going to come up that will trigger special abilities as well. So a lot of different scenarios and items that you can use, even just in the base box, to customize the game. I mentioned that blight card. There's a huge deck of those that give either a bonus or a a consequence at different thresholds in the game. A lot of things to try and mess around with. So it's just something really special about the game. Another thing, the theme is really unlike anything that you've ever seen in a game before. Lots of games are about colonizing an island and building up your civilization. This one's all about destroying it and preventing that from happening. Right? Okay, if you abstract it, you're just it's sort of the same thing as Pandemic, but in the thematic confines of this game, it feels different, right? You're combating a force using wonderful and glorious powers of nature. It's just a really interesting feel and an interesting world that this game lives in that's unlike anything else that's out there. There's a lot of, another thing that makes it special is a lot of cleverness. There's lots of clever moments in the game. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the game is about spotting weaknesses in this predictable enemy's plans. You have a lot of information. There's very little in the game that comes as a surprise, at least in terms of what the invaders are doing. And so you can sort of see what's coming, make a plan, and execute it. And you can say, okay, look, I have this card that I need to use 2 turns. Well, okay, I'll use it this turn. I'll do something great. And then that means my power in my growth phase is going to have to be a little bit weaker because I've got to recover it. Like that lightning spirit I mentioned, right? They can do a lot of things in one turn. They can have a big colossal turn, but then they've got to take a little bit of time to rebuild their power. So that's, you have those options. And like I said, there's a huge stack of these, and they're all going to be different. But what you do is, it feels great when you see that small hole, that moment where you have a chance to step in and mess something up for those invaders so that you have an easier path to victory. And the game is all about figuring out what those are. If you just sort of do what feels natural, the game might not be all that much fun. It's going to feel like, oh my goodness, this game is really hard. It's a constant onslaught of difficulty. And if you don't use your opportunities well, you'll very quickly lose. But if you're paying attention and working together and using each other's powers and boosting each other and coordinating your assault on the island, it has great opportunities where you can find an exploit and just drive a wedge into that and have that be your key to victory. And that just feels fantastic when it happens. Also, I mentioned that it's great cooperatively, right? It's a great game to play with other people, but it's also fantastic solo. It scales very well with difficulty. Essentially, you just use one island for each player, one island piece. And so that's naturally going to give you more of each type of land for the invaders to come in. It's going to increase the amount of people that are going to come in and affect you. And it also gives you access to more spirits with more unique powers. So it scales quite well. And as a solo game, it's really quite fun. You can make it difficult, more difficult or less difficult by adding an additional island or giving yourself different bonuses. The rules give you lots of different ways to do that. But I've played it a lot by myself, and I've had a great experience with it. And honestly, that's how you how you get good at the game sometimes, is figuring out how one spirit works, and then you can take it into a game with more people and have a little bit more competence as you're helping sort of manage your own spirit, and then they can manage theirs, and you can really work together well. So it works well solo. I just there's a lot that makes this game special. The artwork's great. I like, each of the spirits looks different. The artwork on the cards is fantastic. Lots of different. I've always kind of liked those big monstery kaiju looking things. And then you've got this one here. Look at this. If it will focus, I guess it might not. But you've got this wave of water with a face that's just encompassing the city. That's the kind of thing I love. These elemental spirits that come out and attack stuff. It's great artwork. A lot of it's a good looking game for the most part. And with that, we're going to move on to where's the but. There's a couple of things, and only a couple, that I don't love about the game. First of all, and I thought I had put it somewhere, but the different islands that you're using in the game, here's one. They're more functional than beautiful, right? This is the board you're playing on. And it is very functional. It's very easy to read. You can easily see what the different regions are, and that matters for the cards, right? I mean, the blue card, the wetlands card is also going to have the same color. So it's very easy to see where things go. But it doesn't look great. And these little invader pieces, they look kind of cheap. They're just white plastic. I don't love that. And there's the basic game came with lots of kind of cardboardy tokens for the resources. I have upgraded mine to these nice wooden tokens, which are much nicer. But the base components, it's good quality, nice thick cardboard. The cardstock's nice, but it just doesn't look great. It almost looks, this side of the board almost looks prototypey. So that's a knock against the game. But the answer to it, like I said, the game comes with lots of options. You can use the other side. This other side looks great. It has a nice map with topographical features. It looks like a great map, but it's very difficult to see, to know what the different regions are. It's much less functional if you use it on that side. So you're balancing whether you want it to look good or whether you want it to be functional. And I don't know that I like to have to make that choice. I usually go with functional, though, because as we're about to get to on number 2, there's a lot going on in this game. This game is a very difficult game to learn. It's a difficult game to teach. There's the rules are simple. You just do these things, but the interactions and the way that things work and sort of the timing and the processing, it's almost Sentinels of the Multiverse like, in that you kind of need an extra brain in a jar. I said it's great solo. It is, but I only ever would play one spirit solo. If you add an extra spirit in, that is it's exponentially more difficult to process all of the different things. You just need one. You need one brain per character in this game. So it's a very difficult game to figure out. The rules do not help. The base rule book is really kind of a mess. It starts out, it's like the first half of it is concepts in the game and it explains everything conceptually. And then the second half, it says, now here are the rules. And you kind of have to go back and forth between them. It was a rough learn from, from the rule book. And I don't think that I felt confident that I knew how to play the game until I'd played it 3 or 4 times. So that's why I prefer the functional side of the board, because there's enough going on with all of the rules and interactions in the game and the different cards. And each spirit has a bunch of different powers, and you've got to keep track of these icons, and you got to keep track of when something's going to happen and what happens first and second. There's just so much going on that this game is not for the faint of heart. And a lot of people who play it just once, probably, it's possible to have your first play. In fact, I think even mine was like this of, okay, that happened. And I remember I got it, and I had heard, many people had talked about how it was such a special game. My first time, I was kind of like, I don't know if I played that right. By my 5th or 6th game, I was thinking, this is fantastic, right? Once you've played this is a game you really have to get into if you're going to enjoy it. It is not for someone just casually to pick up and play. So that's kind of a negative thing about it. Now, I will say that if you are the kind of person who wants to get into this game, then there is a lot there. And if it's going to be one of those games that you just play and play and play and play, then it's going to be really rewarding for you. But that, magic comes with a price, unfortunately. I often, I do keep track of all the games that I play. And so, I mean, I've played Spirit Island a lot of times. I'm just trying to look it up really quickly to see if I can find it. It says that I have played the game 257 times. Now, let's say that the first 2 or 3 don't count because I had no idea what I was doing. After that, I just really got into it. And even though there are a lot of rules, I don't have to read them. It's not like a game like Robinson Crusoe or something where I have to relearn the game. No, I could come back to this a year later, having not touched it, and be really right where I want it to be with most of the rules. So there's a lot to learn, but once you learn, it's very rewarding and can really stick with you. So my final rating, I mean, look, if you've watched my top 100 games, this is I think it might have been my number 2 this year. It is a game that I really like a lot. It is a game that I've, look, if you've played it 200 and some times, 257 times, obviously I enjoy it. This is a game I give a 10 out of 10, hands down, no questions asked. It is one of my favorite games ever. I do not recommend it for everyone. It feels odd saying that, but this is not a game for the faint of heart. If you're not going to get into this game, then you might not even want to try it. It's not one everybody has to play. But for me, it just hits me right where it counts every single time. I love this game, and I highly recommend it to those who are willing to give it the the respect that it deserves. Anyway, that's it for this week's version. Next week, I'm going to come back and I'm going to rank. I'm not going to rank all of the spirits. I have done so, but I'm going to sort of talk about my top 10 spirits from the game, explain why I like them, what I think is fun and interesting about them. And, if you want to get into the game more deeply, like I've suggested, that will hopefully be interesting for you. If not, hey, it'll be me talking about something that you might not have any idea about, but that's okay. It'll still be fun. Anyway, I thank you for joining me this week, and I'll look forward to talking to you more about Spirit Island in greater depth next week. But until then, have a great time and go try a fantastic game. All right, bye-bye.